Hey everyone.
Hey guys.
Welcome to another Travel Therapy Mentor video. Tonight we're doing a Q&A. We collected some questions from you guys over the past few days. We haven't done a Q&A now for probably 2 or 3 years, so I thought it'd be a good idea to do one of those again. We're actually live on Facebook and Instagram, so we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, it's been a little while since we did an Instagram, so hi Instagram and hey Facebook.
All right, so we've got our questions. We got everything compiled that you guys sent to us. But if you have any other questions as we go or any follow-up questions, then feel free to ask those in the comments and we'll get to those as well.
Yeah, so those of you that are joining in live from Instagram, feel free to say hi in the comments and ask us any additional questions that you have about travel therapy. Throughout, we'll answer the live questions at the end. We're going to go through the ones that we received in advance first. And same thing if you're watching on Facebook Live, feel free to say hi in the comments. You can also just introduce yourself and let us know if you're a current traveler, if you're someone who's thinking about traveling. Also, shout out to those of you that will listen later on our podcast or on YouTube on the replay.
Yep.
So we got quite a variety of questions. Some of these are some of the more basic, like how-to questions, more like the Travel Therapy 101. Some of them are a little bit more advanced, so there's a little bit of something for everybody depending on which stage of travel therapy you're in. We've also got some finance-related questions. We also got some questions about our recent big news. So for those of you that keep up with us on Instagram and Facebook, you probably saw our announcement last week that I'm pregnant and that we're expecting a baby this fall. So we definitely got a few questions regarding what is that going to look like as far as travel goes, insurance and all those kinds of things. So we'll be answering all of those questions tonight.
Yeah, and any experienced travelers on here, if you want to chime in on any questions, add your perspective as well. I know a lot of newer travelers would appreciate that as well.
Alrighty.
Okay, so the first question, do you work with multiple companies? If so, how do you navigate telling the recruiters? Yes, we work with multiple companies, we work with a ton of companies. We always recommend that others work with multiple companies as well. In terms of navigating telling recruiters, I mean, you should always be upfront with them right away. Any experienced recruiter, any good recruiter is going to realize that having more recruiters working for you, finding jobs for you, is going to give you the best options available. And being a traveler, you want to have as many good options as you can find. So any good recruiter will understand that. You know, they might not have a job that fits you perfectly, another company might. And you know, it's about finding the best fit for you. It's good for the clients, it's good for you, it's good for the companies. So any good recruiter will understand that.
Yeah, we generally recommend that you work with a team of 2 to 3 different recruiters at different companies. And this is especially important when you're a new traveler and you're getting to know different recruiters, meeting them, finding out who works best for you. But we still do this even as travelers that have been traveling for almost a decade. Every single job search, we always go back to our team of recruiters and we say, what do you have available for us? And we're very transparent with all the recruiters that we're working with multiple. You know, hey, I am looking for jobs with other companies. They should completely understand that. You just have to be a little bit savvy on how you go about getting submitted to jobs. You don't want to get submitted to the same job by more than one recruiter. So if they present a job to you that sounds like it could be the same job, like say it's the same city and the same setting, then that's when you need to find out what the name of the facility is, so you make sure that it's not the same, and if it is, you just choose one recruiter to submit you to that job. In general, we recommend not getting submitted to more than about like 3 or 4 jobs at a time, just because it can get a little tricky with lining up interviews and that sort of thing. But most travel therapists work with more than one company. It's totally doable. We do have an article about this on our website at traveltherapymentor.com of how to best navigate that situation.
Yep, we're getting some questions on Instagram. I think some of these, I saw a couple, I think we're already going to cover those with the questions we already got. But if not, we'll go back to the questions, the live questions at the end.
Yeah, so definitely keep the questions coming. Thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
All right, how difficult is it to switch agencies? It's not that difficult. I mean, filling out onboarding paperwork can be a pain. But in terms of like taking a job with another company, I mean, it should only take you probably a few hours of getting all your documents together, submitting things. I think probably the biggest pain is submitting your references again and having this new company call your references depending on your situation. For us, we don't take that many contracts anymore, so references can be an issue for us. And we don't want the people that we've worked with being bothered by 5 or 6 different companies. So that can be an issue depending on your situation, but overall, a couple hours of paperwork and it's not a big deal.
The other thing to think about is if you do decide to switch companies from one contract to the next would be benefits, which benefits is another thing that we're going to cover. That can be a little bit of a headache, but it's not as big of a deal as you would think. We have definitely switched companies before from one contract to the next, and typically the pros outweigh the cons in that situation for us. If the other company has a job that the company we're currently in contract with doesn't have. If it's much higher pay, if it's a really special location, that's worth it to us to go through the small bit of paperwork and hassle for switching companies. We've switched companies multiple times over the years. We've probably taken jobs with 5 or 6 different companies now over the years. So totally doable. Just need to make sure that you're doing it appropriately, keeping everybody in the loop.
All right, next question. What's the best company you've worked with? This is not a one-size-fits-all answer. We've worked, like we said, with a bunch of different companies. It depends on where you're looking. It depends on the setting you want. It depends on the benefits you need. There are over 200 travel companies out there now, so it's like you can't just pick a single one. They all have their pros and cons, and that's why we've interviewed 20 to 30 over the years now, and we have 50 recruiters that we work with, because we want to be able to send people to the best ones that will fit their needs. So if you're looking for the best company for you, we have a form on our website, a recruiter request form. You can fill out what you're looking for, and we can give you recommendations.
Yeah, so if you just go to traveltherapymentor.com/recruiters, if you're on Instagram, you can just click the link in our bio, click the recruiter recommendation form. We take a look at every single one of those. I read every one of them personally, and I look at what are your preferences, and then I will recommend 3 different recruiters that I think would be a good fit for you based on your preferences. Because what's the best company for you may not be the same as for somebody else.
Yeah, an example of that, say you're looking for outpatient in Virginia versus home health in California, our recommendations are going to be completely different. So it really just depends.
It also really depends, like if you're a new grad and say you point out in your form that mentorship and guidance are really important to you, versus if you're someone who's more of an experienced clinician and all you care about is getting the top pay, my recommendations are going to be different there depending on your personal situation.
Next question was, what's the average take home that you would make per month? This is tough because, again, it varies a lot. I would say you can find pay packages right now if you're an evaluating clinician, PTOT, SLP, anywhere from probably $1,600 to $1,700 a week all the way up to $2,900 a week, and it depends on the setting and location are the main factors there. I would say the average right now, probably somewhere in the $1,900 to $2,100 a week range.
And that's after taxes.
After taxes. So per month, that would be somewhere around $8,500 a month after taxes, something like that, $85,000 to $9,000 a month after taxes.
Yeah, we have a really detailed article on our website called How Much Money Do Travel Therapists Make? And it breaks down exactly how the pay packages work, which one of the next questions that we got was, how does the tax-free money work as part of being a traveler? And so it really breaks that down. So if you're coming, especially from like a perm job, it's really important that you read that article and understand exactly how the pay packages are broken down, because the pay packages for travel therapy are much different than for permanent therapy. Because if you qualify as a traveler, you can get some of your pay tax-free. And then we usually talk about pay as a weekly after-tax rate. So when you see jobs posted, if it says net pay, that means you're making, say, $2,000 a week after taxes actually in your bank account every week.
Yep. So yeah, varies a lot. Benefits like health insurance, et cetera, is that something travel companies cover? I think we also got a question on Instagram about that. Almost every travel company, there are a few that don't offer health insurance, but almost every travel company will offer health insurance as part of the benefits that they offer to you while you're on contract. So for the most part, most travelers, I would say definitely over half of travelers take the company insurance, probably 60 or 70%. The other ones either go through a third party or go through a marketplace plan. And a lot of that just depends on your personal situation, your life circumstances. If you're planning to switch companies a lot, or you just want to work with one company, that will factor into what you choose to do.
Yeah, and then the next question was, if you have a lapse between contracts, like say if you take a break between contracts, what do you do about insurance coverage during that time? So typically, if you take your next contract with the same company and you take off less than a month, it's usually about 3 to 4 weeks, your insurance will carry over during that time off. And most travelers only take off like 2 to 3 weeks between contracts, and that works out really well for them. However, like I said, if you decide to switch companies for that next contract, you would have to pick up new insurance. Or if you take a break longer than a month, then you would have a lapse in your coverage. You have different options in this situation. Sometimes you can use COBRA, which is just an extension of the insurance plan you were on prior. This applies for permanent jobs too. When you lose your job, you can stay on a COBRA version of the same insurance you were on for a slightly higher rate for a short period of time. You can also choose to go onto like a marketplace plan or a private plan during that time. Some travelers choose to just maintain private insurance year round, so they don't have to worry about those gaps. That's what we do now. After we stopped traveling full time, we started just keeping our own insurance year round, so we didn't have to worry about having gaps. Just want to give a quick shout out to those of you that are watching live. Hi, Nick. Hi, Ashley. Hi, Allie. Hey, Kurt. Hey, Cindy.
And there's a ton of people on Instagram.
Hey, guys on Instagram. I don't know all of your first names because some of your screen names are not the same, but thanks for tuning in. Let's see. I can see there's a Lillian, a Melissa, Megan.
There's too many to say.
Rachel, Sarah. Thank you guys for tuning in. And those of you guys that did ask questions, we will get to those after we get through the ones that we received prior to the video. So feel free to keep asking. Oh, hey, Chris. Thanks for tuning in, Chris. So yeah, feel free to keep asking questions.
Okay, housing. How do you find housing during a contract? A lot of different ways. It depends on what you're looking for. We think that Furnish Finder is probably the go-to. You should probably check that first if you're looking for short-term housing. Obviously, that's going to be different than someone traveling in a van or a camper or whatever. But Furnish Finder is always the first place we look. It's basically Airbnb for healthcare travel.
Oh, sorry, as I muted us for just a sec, I was answering. Kurt asked, is this where we ask questions in the comment section? Yes, it is.
Yeah. Furnish Finder, Facebook groups, if you look for travel nurse housing groups, those are great. We've found housing on there before. We also have used Craigslist in the past. So the lighting is weird.
I think I messed things up when I started touching the screen.
Yeah.
So now we look a little bit funny, but anyway, so yeah, lots of different resources for finding housing. We've done a variety of things over the years.
Yeah, Nick says he uses Airbnb. You can always check Airbnb too. If you find good deals on there, or you can negotiate with the hosts off of Airbnb, then sometimes you can make things work there. It's just that a lot of times it's more expensive than something like Furnish Finder because it's more short-term based.
The next question we got is about having a permanent residence or a permanent tax home. Do you have to have a permanent tax address, and how does that work as a traveler? So yes, as part of what we mentioned about how you get paid as a true traveler, if you want to receive the tax-free stipends, then you have to be meeting what are called the tax home rules. Keep in mind, these are IRS rules. These aren't just as it pertains to a particular travel company or a particular facility. These are IRS rules that you need to meet in order to qualify to receive some of your money tax-free, right? The government just doesn't give us tax-free money just for fun, just because we say we're a travel therapist. So there's certain rules you have to meet. One of them is maintaining a permanent tax home that you return to. You don't abandon that home, so you go there roughly 30 days a year. You have expenses at that home, so it either needs to be a home that you own or rent, or if you rent a room in a house from someone else, you need to have an actual lease, some type of paper trail that shows, okay, yes, I do pay expenses at this home, and I also duplicate expenses when I go and live for my contracts. So there's other rules that you have to meet, but those are the main ones. Is make sure you don't abandon your home, make sure you have financial ties there. It's best to also it's typically going to be the place where you get your mail, where you have your driver's license, where your car is registered, where you have all these permanent residence type ties. But the duplicating expenses is super important, because the reason why they're giving you tax-free stipends toward your housing and your meals and incidentals part of your pay package is because you have duplicate expenses. You have a home base, and you also have a place that you pay rent for a travel job.
Yep. Ashley had a follow-up on health insurance that was a good question. You maintain your health insurance year-round through your home state, although you travel to different states. Yes, everything you do as a traveler should be through your home state. You don't want to be changing your address on things regularly, because you might live in 4 different states throughout the year and have 4 different temporary addresses. So you want to keep everything at your permanent address, as long as you're a traditional traveler with a tax home.
Yep. Alrighty, so getting into a few other types of questions that we got here. Do you recommend travel therapy as a new grad? And this is something we've talked about a lot. We highly recommend, if you're a new grad, you check out some of our new grad content on our website. We've done a lot of detailed videos about this. In short, it's not for everybody, but it does work well for some people. We personally started traveling as new grad physical therapists back in 2015, and we've had a good experience. We've also mentored thousands of other new grads at this point. Basically, what it comes down to is knowing yourself as a clinician, knowing if you feel pretty confident and pretty good to go out and start as a traveler. You typically do need to be able to hit the ground running, but there are opportunities to find mentorship as a new grad. You just have to ask the right questions. You can get into a bad situation in a travel job. You can also get into a bad situation in a permanent job. So it's really important that you do your research in advance and make sure to ask the right questions. And again, it's just not for everybody. Some people don't adapt well. They're not good in new environments. They're not good moving around. They don't need that added stress to already being a new clinician. But if you're somebody who felt really good during your final internships, you're ready to go, you adapt well to new clinics, new EMRs, all that, it may be a good fit for you. So it's definitely don't, turn it away just because you may have heard some people say that it's bad for new grads. We've known many new grads that were very successful.
Yep. This is an interesting one. What work things have major contracts and enjoyable experience, and the opposite? So what have made it a good experience? What have made it a bad experience? I think the biggest thing for us has always been reasonable productivity. So finding a contract, we mostly do outpatient that doesn't do a ton of double booking. That really makes or breaks an experience for us. If we're seeing, 15 or 16 patients in a day, it's going to be a rough contract. But most of ours have been between like 8 and 10 on average, which is very reasonable and makes it pretty enjoyable. Another thing that kind of breaks a contract, I would say, is like if the manager is too overbearing about things, like either about the way you treat. Sometimes you run into that. Sometimes you run into like issues where they want you to bill more than you're comfortable with. Those types of things really can make a contract not so great.
Yeah, and these are things that you want to tease out during your phone interview. This is where we always harp on the fact that it's very important you ask a lot of questions during your phone interview to get a feel for what your day-to-day is going to look like. I would say productivity and like how your schedule looks is one of the big make or break things that makes a contract good or not. Obviously coworkers can make it good or not, but you can't really tease out during a phone interview if your coworkers are going to be good or not. But at least if you can find out if the facility runs and operates smoothly, if your schedule is going to be manageable, that'll help determine if it's going to be good or not.
Yeah, support staff, that's really helpful. If the clinic has techs or not, that can often be a real big game changer. If they have good techs that can at least clean up tables and do some things for you, put things away, clean things, that makes a big difference. And even like front office people that can schedule for you. We've worked at clinics, you take that for granted, but we've worked at clinics that don't have a front office person to schedule. So you're scheduling all your patients, you're cleaning tables. Those kind of things can make it hard. Also
the EMR, you want to ask what documentation system they use. Some of them are better than others. So yeah, definitely ask as many questions as you can during the interview to try to feel out if it's going to be a good fit for you or not.
Have you ever canceled a contract? If so, were you negatively affected? We've never canceled contracts. We have had situations where it wasn't ideal and we threatened to cancel a contract and gave them a chance to change things, make it better. And every time we've ever done that, usually this has something to do with scheduling or with productivity issues. Every time we've given them a chance to fix it, they fix it. And so if you just say like, hey, I'm not comfortable with this, this is not a good situation for me, what can we do? Almost always they're willing to work with you. Obviously, if it's a really terrible situation or they don't work with you at all, then yes, you can cancel a contract, but we've never had that happen.
Yeah, this should be a rarity. Most of the time you should not be canceling contracts just on a whim unless things are really seriously bad. Most of the time you can work it out. We had some bad ones where we seriously thought about canceling, but most of the time, like Jared said, once we talked about it, they were able to make some kind of adjustment and we were able to make it work for 13 weeks, even if it wasn't our favorite contract ever. So it should be rare that you cancel a contract. But
Nick said he canceled 3 of his first 4 contracts. Still going strong 7 years later though. So
yeah, and it just depends. There are certain circumstances, like if it's just egregiously bad, if there's really unethical things going on, yes, there are certain circumstances where you would need to cancel. Or I would say too, if you have a family emergency or something, there's certain circumstances where you would absolutely just have to cancel. But it shouldn't just be like, I don't really like this place. I'm gonna get out of here.
Yeah.
You should try to use it sparingly.
This question I think had to do with the video we made a couple weeks ago. It says, why would you choose temporary PRN position versus a local travel position? So I guess that's assuming that if you wanted to work PRN somewhere in an area, why would you go the PRN route versus finding a travel contract that's local? The big thing there is sometimes it can be hard to find travel contracts in a certain area. So if there's nothing available travel-wise, PRN jobs, there's almost always PRN, and pretty much any area we've ever looked, there's PRN jobs open. So availability is the big thing. It could also be that PRN is more flexible, whereas most travel contracts you're working 32 to 40 hours a week. PRN, when we work PRN, we want it to be super flexible and usually do 1 or 2 days a week, whereas that's kind of hard to find with travel contracts. So that's why we would choose to do that.
Yeah, I think it really ultimately just depends on your preferences and the certain situation of what you're able to negotiate short term with a facility is what it would ultimately come down to.
How do you arrange part-time contracts? So some of you guys watching may or may not know, we lately, probably the last 3 or 4 years, we've only done part-time contracts. Usually that's 2 or 3 days a week. Basically, when you're negotiating a part-time contract, it's not like there's just a list of part-time contracts. No one's really listing them. So you kind of have to go out of your way. I wouldn't say it's easy. Like if you're a traveler that just wants to find a job, take it, you have like a set time schedule, I would not try to find a part-time contract. But if you're flexible and you're willing to wait a week or 2 or 3 weeks if you don't find anything, then you can usually make it work. And that's how we are now. Like we don't have any reason that we need to be starting a contract at any certain date. So we'll say we want to find a 2-day-a-week outpatient contract on the Big Island of Hawaii. And then we tell our recruiters that. They usually have some insight into these clinics, and they might be like, hey, I know the manager at this place. I can ask them if they'll take you 2 days a week. And often that's how we find them. They're not listed anywhere, but some clinics, they might need someone a couple days a week, or they might need a full-time person, but they're willing to take someone 2 or 3 days a week instead if they can't find a full-time person.
This is going to be a rare situation. Most of you watching are like, why would I only want to work part-time? Most of you are needing to work full-time financially, but there are certain people like us that maybe you have another business, a side business, or you're in some kind of circumstance where you might want to do a part-time travel contract. Obviously, it's not going to be as lucrative. You're only working a couple of days a week, but we have been able to negotiate it with a couple of different outpatient private practices. We've never negotiated it with any other settings, so we don't know if other settings, especially like hospital systems, would do it, but outpatient PT has definitely been willing to work with us in certain situations. We've done it. This is our 3rd contract that we've done part-time.
I think 4th. What does the future of travel therapy look like in terms of recruiters, agencies, AI?
This is interesting.
This is interesting because if you would have asked me 5 years ago if there would still be so many recruiters involved in travel therapy or if it would be more automated, I would have said for sure it'd be more automated. But honestly, in the last 5 years, we haven't noticed much change at all. So I think things are changing, but it's much slower than I would have anticipated 4 or 5 years ago. So I think that there will gradually be more automation, more AI use over time. There'll probably be less recruiters. There'll probably be consolidation of agencies, but that might take 5, 6, 7, 8 years to play out. It's really hard to know about the progress of AI and when it's going to be a viable way for people to actually communicate and find jobs that way.
We definitely are seeing a shift in the industry from the time that we started to now. There's definitely a little bit more automation. You'll probably see a lot with like more job lists, more companies having apps, ways that the traveler is more in control, can use the website, can use the app, can click to submit to a job. Typically there's still a recruiter that's pretty involved, but it used to be a lot more involved where you didn't have as much transparency to look at the job lists, to look at the pay packages. It used to be very much the recruiter kept all the information and they would just piece it out to you as needed. So we are seeing some progress in that area, but in a lot of situations we find that a lot of travelers do still prefer to have that recruiter relationship because there's so many moving parts that come to travel therapy. It's nice to have somebody to ask questions. They have to be that middleman for you sometimes to get in touch with this department or this, talk to the agency or whatever it might be. So we'll see how it progresses. But it definitely, like Jared said, it hasn't progressed quite as quickly as we thought. I mean, it was probably at TravCon like 2019 that we first heard some companies talk about doing more automated, less recruiter, and we really just haven't seen it that much.
Yeah, and back then we got all excited about it. We were like, oh man, recruiting is going to change completely, and it has not changed almost at all. So it's hard to say. I mean, it could be exactly the same as it is 5 years from now, or it could be that you're mostly talking to an AI assistant and you have a recruiter that just submits you, and that recruiter can have 300 travelers since the AI is doing most of it. It could change a lot.
Yeah, so we'll see. Stay tuned. We're learning, as it goes. But again, if you guys are watching live, if you wouldn't mind just hitting the thumbs up button or the heart button, let us know that you're watching. Feel free to ask questions. We're going to go at the end and answer all your questions in the comments.
Yeah, we're like halfway through the questions now. Let's go through just a couple of the questions we already have since people are watching live.
Okay, sure. Is this at the top?
Yeah, let's go to that one.
Okay, so we'll answer a couple of your live questions. So Allison on Instagram asks, I've often been told that recruiters get a heavy caseload or a higher productivity standard than, not recruiters, travelers get a higher caseload than the perm staff. Can you speak about this a little bit?
Yeah, it's a good question. We heard the same thing when we started, and honestly, our experience has been probably 95% of the time that is not the case at all. And if anything, we've worked contracts where we have a lighter caseload. And the reason for that being, we're hourly employees. A lot of these clinics, they have full-time staff that is salaried, and we are the only hourly ones. So we come in, and if we can't complete our work in the 8 hours or whatever it is allotted in a day, then they have to pay us overtime. Whereas the permanent staff, a lot of times they're scheduling them a lot more patients than they can handle in 8 hours. They do the documentation at home, that kind of stuff. So a lot of times our caseload is less than the permanent staff. There are situations where we have gotten more difficult patients, and like, for one example I can think of at one of the contracts we went to, when I started there, I didn't have a caseload, obviously, and the therapist, I could tell that like whatever patients they kind of wanted to just like be done with, they kind of moved over to my schedule. And so that was like 3 or 4 patients that I could tell were more difficult, that they didn't really want to deal with anymore. But after that, I mean, I'm doing my own eval, seeing my own patients. So that's the only time I can ever think of like having more difficult patients as a traveler.
Yeah, honestly, we've really never had this experience at all. We've always been treated very well as travelers, the same or even less caseload as the permanent staff. So great question though.
Go up. Yep. Okay.
Alrighty, so a couple more questions that we got here live. Is it possible for you to do a side hustle, like seeing patients on the side while doing travel therapy?
It's possible. It's not going to be easy though, because in those types of situations, a lot of your patients are word of mouth, and it would be really hard in like 3 or 6 months that you're there to really build up any sort of clientele. And then you also have to be very careful about situations where you might be stepping on the toes of your employer, like maybe taking patients from them. I know non-competes are not really a thing anymore, but you might run into issues where there's conflicts of interest. So honestly, I probably would not even try that. If you're going to work PRN, you can definitely do that, but I don't think I would try to set up any kind of like side hustle that way, just because the logistics and things are going to be difficult.
Yeah, for the most part, your best bet here is just going to be able to pick up like some other side job that's not therapy related. Like we've known people that did, Uber Eats or Uber or Rover or things on the weekends, or to pick up a PRN job. We've done a PRN job before while we were on contract, like in a different setting. Like Jared worked PRN at the skilled nursing across from the hospital where his travel therapy contract was. So, it is possible, but if you really want to hustle, and then also if you have some type of existing side hustle, like we do, like we have our online business, that's something you can continue to maintain. Like if it's an online type situation, we know some people that do like online fitness coaching or those types of things online. That's certainly doable.
Yeah. Ali said, in regards to housing, also ask about housing tips during your interview. I found quite a few good deals that the hospital has links with from previous travelers. Yeah, that's a great idea. If you can't find anything on Facebook or on Furnish Finder and you talk to the manager, ask them if they know of anything in the area. We've gotten a couple leads that way.
Another question on Instagram from Grace. How do you go about getting licenses in multiple states and starting contracts ASAP? This is a great question. So you do have to be a bit proactive when it comes to licensure. It depends on your discipline. If you're a physical therapist or a PTA who is eligible for the PT Compact, this makes it a lot easier. You have to be, in order to be eligible, your home state has to be one of the ones participating in the Compact. When you are a member of the Compact, you don't have to apply in advance for other Compact states. Now, you still would have to apply the regular way for any non-Compact states, for example, like California or Hawaii or Alaska. But for those of you that are not eligible for any kind of Compact, no worries. We've done it the traditional way all these years. We've actually never used the PT Compact. This just requires you to be a little bit more strategic. We do recommend having 1 to 3 travel therapy licenses, not travel therapy licenses, but just state licenses in different states prior to getting started and prior to submitting to jobs. You don't want to wait and submit to a job and then get the license afterwards, because it typically takes too long.
Yep. On Facebook, Kurt had a question. What do you guys do for a tax home? We're uncomfortable using our parents anymore, but buying a house to leave it seems kind of backwards. We used our parents' house for probably 4 years, I think, the first 4 years that we traveled. Whitney rented a room for her mom, I rented a room for my mom. But then after that, we bought a townhouse, and that's what we use as our tax home. We go back there a lot more now, so it made sense for us to have a place back home. I would say buying a house just to have a tax home is not a good idea, especially right now. Housing prices are crazy, rates are high. In that situation, what I would do is try to find like a studio apartment or something that you can rent for pretty cheap, or maybe even find like a basement apartment or something that you can rent from someone in your tax home area, and you should get a lot better deal that way. Maybe look for something in the $900 to $1,200 a month range, depending on where you live. That'll be a lot better than buying a house and having to deal with it sitting vacant while you're gone.
On Instagram, somebody wanted to know, is it possible to travel as a PTA? Yes, you can travel as a PTA, a PT, an OT, an OTA, or an SLP, as well as obviously nursing and other disciplines as well. Somebody asked a question that we kind of already addressed. Is it annoying to switch between companies with the paperwork and the insurance? It can be annoying, but again, usually the pros outweigh the cons, depending on the situation, like if they have a much better job. So it's not that huge of a deal. We've done it plenty of times.
Yeah, if you're going to make an extra $200 or $300 a week switching companies, it's definitely worth the hassle. If it's an extra $30 a week, probably not worth the hassle. It just
or
depends.
if it's an exclusive job that the other company just doesn't have. So
Yeah.
there's certain situations where the hassle is worth it. Eddie says, hey, started traveling because of you guys. Thanks for all the info. You're welcome, Eddie. I'm so glad to hear that. What do you guys do about benefits when going between different companies? Yeah, so we kind of answered that as well. Now, these days, we keep our own insurance. We're both on just government marketplace plans. At one point, I was on a private insurance plan. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about what we're going to do now that we're having a baby. But yeah, for the most part, we carry our own insurance now, but it is possible to just switch insurance from company to company, depending on what's your preference.
I think that might be all of them.
See if there's any other live questions right now, and if not, we'll keep going through the ones that we got before. Alrighty.
All right. I'm about to start PT school, but I'm worried about the amount of debt I'll have. What tips do you have? I'm sure a lot of you guys can offer some advice in the comments on this as well. I think most people watching this are already PTs, so to a prospective PT student, what would you recommend? For us, we recommend trying to find a program that's as low cost as possible. Most programs are pretty comparable. We've gone and spoken at different programs. We went to different programs ourselves, talked to people from all kinds of different programs. They're pretty comparable. So if you can find a school that is half the price as a different school and you can get into that school, I mean, that would be one of my top criteria for finding a school right now, is one that has decent tuition. So trying to keep your costs as low as possible while in school. And that also includes things like try to work part-time, try to find a tech job that's going to apply directly to your education. Because if you're working as a tech while you're in PT school, you're picking up some of the patient care type things that you're going to have to figure out anyway, some of those soft skills. You're also seeing how some therapists treat. That can help you, and it can save you a lot of money there. Try to have roommates in PT school. That makes a huge difference. What else would you recommend?
Yeah, just try to keep your costs as low as possible. I know for me in PT school, I ended up taking out like the max amount of loans possible. At the time, I just really didn't have a good concept of finances, and I was like, I need money to live on. I need money for rent, and I didn't really do my best to keep my rent as low as possible. I didn't do my best to keep my living expenses as low as possible, and I ended up racking up a lot of debt. So if you're money conscious and you're thinking about it ahead of time, try to take out the minimum amount of debt that you need. See if you can pick up part-time work or something to cover your expenses and, cheaper rent, all those types of things. And then on the back end, depending on how far into the process you already are and you've already started to rack up the debt, then it'll get into talking about what are some strategies for paying it off versus going income-driven repayment. And that's actually the next question that we got.
Yeah, the next question was biggest tip for paying off student loans. Honestly, the more crazy that student loans get over time, the higher tuition goes. When we graduated, it was already crazy, and that was 9 years ago, and it's done nothing but continue to go up. I would say the majority of people graduating right now are not going to pay off their loans. The majority of people are going to go on an income-based repayment plan and pay the minimum for however long until the loans are forgiven, because it's kind of unrealistic. We talk to new grads all the time that are starting to travel with $300,000 or $350,000 in tuition, like in loans, and your minimum payment on that for 10 years would be, I don't know, probably $3,500 a month or something insane. No one can afford that. So I would say the majority of people at this point, especially since these programs are getting more and more lenient, payments are lower and lower on the income-driven repayment plans, probably makes sense for the majority of people to go on an income-driven repayment plan, save as much money as you can, invest that money, but probably not try to pay off your loans unless you have a small amount of debt. If you have $100,000 or less, then yeah, you probably have a pretty good chance of paying that off. But if you're in the $200,000 to $400,000 range, you should talk to there's a lot of companies now, FitBucks is one of them, that specializes in advising people on student loans, but I think they would offer the same advice. If your income is not equal to the amount of debt you have, so you don't have a 1-to-1 ratio between your debt and your annual income, your chances of paying off that debt is pretty low, and you probably want to go income-based.
Yeah, and if you're unfamiliar with all these concepts, if you're like, what are you talking about? Don't pay off your debt. I have to pay off my debt, right? Jared has written tons of articles about income-driven repayment plans, student loan forgiveness. Most recently, the new plan is called the SAVE plan. He's got tons of articles about the math behind it, why you might choose to, defer the debt for now and invest in your future instead. Start investing in your retirement accounts and all that. Jared first came up with this idea by running the numbers himself back when we graduated in 2015, and that's what we've been doing. We're just riding out the debt on an income-driven repayment plan, and we have invested heavily in our retirement accounts from day one. Again, this was kind of like a fringe topic back then, but it's becoming a lot more common now where people are using these income-driven repayment plans. But if all of that is confusing to you, if all of it's scary to you, a lot of travelers just choose to pay off the debt, and that's fine too. Travel therapy is a big reason, or the financial part of it is a big reason that a lot of therapists choose to go into travel therapy, because you can make 1.5 to 2 times the amount that you would make at a perm job. And we know tons of travel therapists, they were able to completely wipe out their debt within like 3 to 5 years, instead of the standard 10 or so. So it's definitely a big perk, and you can definitely do it with travel therapy if you throw all the money at your loans in the beginning. But Jared, being just like kind of a finance nerd, is like, may not really be in your best interest to do that, but do what works best for you. Read the articles, decide for yourself, talk to a financial advisor.
Yep. This was a really good question. This is something I've been reflecting on a lot, and I've kind of written more about over the years. You guys worked many hours when you started traveling. How was the transition from valuing your time more than money over the course of time? Maybe talk about the mindset aspect.
So just to give a little background before we dive into this, I know some of you guys have been following us for a while, some of you have not. If you're new to our page, we worked full-time for the first 3 years of our careers as travel therapists, from 2015 through 2018.
And not only full-time, we were really hustling back then. We worked, we purposely took contracts close to home so that we wouldn't have to take too much time off to maintain our tax home. So we could work, 3 hours away, go home on weekends, and not have to take time off to go back home. So we were purposely trying to work close to home, working as many weeks as possible in the year. And we had one period there where I think we worked 17 months straight with no time off. We didn't take any days off during that time. So we were really hustling in the beginning. And some travelers do that, but not many.
Yeah, and we were also working overtime. Jared was picking up PRN jobs, doing side hustles, doing everything we could to save as much money as possible in the beginning. Work. And then we transitioned after 3 years to taking 6 months or more off per year. The first year we took 6 months off. The next year it was more than 6 months. And now we work barely clinically at all, and we consider ourselves semi-retired. We usually work about 3 months or less per year as physical therapists. So that's what this person has followed us for a long time, and that's what they were talking about when they asked this question. So just to give you a little background on we did it kind of extreme. We worked really hard in the beginning, and now we don't work hardly at all.
Yeah, honestly, looking back on it now, I kind of regret how hard we worked in the beginning. I think we should have taken more time. We probably should have taken a week or two between contracts to enjoy things more, because we really stressed ourselves out. I mean, we had a couple times where we had like an 11-hour move that we had to do in just one weekend, including packing all our stuff, getting there, getting settled in, and starting on Monday. So I think that was kind of crazy. We could have easily taken an extra week or two between contracts and still been fine. But that being said, that hustling really, really helped us out and put us in a really great position that we're now able to work this more semi-retired type of lifestyle. So there's pros and cons to it. I mean, it really depends on how hard you want to hustle early in your career. I think the more you can hustle early, the less you'll have to do later. So if you want to front load that before you have kids, I think that makes sense. But there's a lot of people too that want to enjoy their life a little bit more than we did. We obviously enjoyed our life while we did it, but at the same time, we sacrificed for sure by doing it the way we did. So I think that's probably not for everybody. I think probably you should take a little more time off and enjoy traveling a little bit more than we did in the beginning.
And the question specifically said, how was this transition between valuing your time more than money over the course of time? And I really think that we went into it knowing that we did value our time all along, and that we were sacrificing in the beginning so that we would have more time and freedom. And that is just the ultimate of what we have done. Honestly, more so than we ever even envisioned. Like back when Jared started talking about this stuff of we could retire or go into working part-time after only, X number of years. I didn't even really believe in that vision because I never had seen it before. We'd never really seen anybody portray that before or do it. You kind of work full-time until you're in your 50s or 60s. So I think we had that mindset initially of like we want to just work really hard now because we've been used to this hustle mindset. Like we've been in school, like PT school is hard, and even my undergrad was hard. I did athletic training, and I was just used to hustling, going. You're always having school and internships and a part-time job, and so we were just like, we'll just keep working like that for a few years right now before we have a family, and then later we'll be able to have more freedom and time. So I think we always had those concepts in mind. We just kind of front loaded it in order to meet that goal.
Yeah, and I think we front loaded a little too much. I would not recommend doing what we did, but I also would recommend hustling a little more than you're comfortable with when you're first out of school, saving as much as possible because you really thank yourself for that later.
Also, before you inflate your lifestyle, because if you do it when you're young, hustle and save and still continue to live frugally before you inflate your lifestyle, it's a lot easier to do when you're coming off being a college student, to still live cheaply, still live with roommates, do these types of things to save as much as possible. Because once you start to enjoy life's luxuries and living on your own and having a nice house and a nice car, it's hard to go backwards later on and sacrifice. So it's easier to sacrifice in the beginning.
All right, so a lot of the last few questions are about family, what we're planning to do, those kind of things. So let's go through some more questions in the comments first before we get to that.
Yep. All right, Kevin on Instagram asks, any updates about the PT Compact? We have not received any recent updates. I think the last one I did was probably in March. As far as I know, there aren't any new states that have been added lately. So check back on like our Instagram reels on the most recent update I did on that. As far as like which states were still in progress, off the top of my head, I know that like Kansas is still in progress and a couple more. But as far as I know, there haven't been any new ones added lately since we last did an update.
Yep. Again, if you guys have any questions or any comments about things we talked about, feel free to leave those in the comments.
John on Instagram wants to know thoughts on jobs that don't take the PT Compact when in that state. This is rare, but it does happen sometimes. There are certain jobs that'll say we'd prefer for you to have the regular license, and we need to check back on this because this was something that was more of an issue in the beginning when the PT Compact first came out. And as far as we understand, it shouldn't be an issue anymore because now all the insurances, Medicare and all the other insurances, are recognizing the PT Compact as the same as having a regular license and being able to bill. But we have gotten this question a few times here lately, so I guess there are some clinics that are maybe just like CYA, like covering themselves to be like, oh, maybe it's better if you just have the regular license so we make sure we don't have any issues. But as far as we know, that's outdated. They should be accepting the Compact.
Yeah, I don't think we've heard anything about a facility requiring that for several years now. Like 5 years ago, that was pretty common, that they were having issues with like Medicare reimbursement and they just wanted travelers to have the full license, but haven't had that in a while.
Yeah, so I don't really understand why they're asking that, but we have gotten a couple travelers say that they are asking. So I think it's more just that they're trying to make sure that when the billing comes, because sometimes, I don't know if you know this as a traveler, the billing may not all go through while you're still there. We've had situations where a couple months after our contract was over, they reached out to ask us to sign something or mention something because they're still trying to bill back for the services that we provided when we were there. So I think they mostly just want to make sure that they're going to be able to bill under your license and get reimbursed even when you're gone if they're still kind of working through those charges. So again, I would try to push back about that though, because I would contact the PT Compact too and clarify. As far as I know, they should be accepting the Compact. You shouldn't have to get the license.
Next question is, how can a foreign trained physical therapist become a travel therapist in the United States? This really depends on the country that you're from and what your education level is there. Some countries are much easier than others. If you're from a country that only requires a bachelor's degree and that's all you have, from what we've seen, most of the time you have to do additional schooling in the United States. If you are from a country that you have a master's or a doctorate, then a lot of times that will transfer. That's especially the case for like Canadian trained therapists. So the way it goes is you basically need to get your license in the United States and then you can take travel contracts. So you can't just reach out to a travel company, take jobs in the United States. You need to go through the hurdles to get the license first. And you also need to, depending on your country, depending on their requirements, you probably need to get a work visa of some sort in the United States before you can travel.
That's usually the biggest hurdle. Unfortunately, a lot of the travel therapy companies will not be able to help you with the work visa. And so that piece of it makes it harder to be a travel therapist in the US. So to our knowledge, all the staffing companies that we work with, the only work visas they can help with are for Canadian, the TN visa. But besides the TN visa, all the staffing companies that we work with do not support work visas from other countries. The only company we've ever heard of that you might want to look into is called MedPro International. So I would look them up.
Phil says, love you guys. Love you too, Phil.
All right, let's see if we have any more questions before we start going through the family pregnancy related stuff. Somebody on Instagram wants to know, what if there's no lease involved in your tax home situation?
We just had a question about this on Instagram the other day. Anytime a situation like that has happened for us, I guess for your tax home situation, it's different. That was about your travel situation.
Yeah.
So your tax home situation, you should definitely have a lease of some sort. Whoever you're renting from, if you're giving them money in exchange for living there, you should have some sort of lease in place to protect both you and the person renting you the place.
Yeah, so if you don't already have something like that, you'd need to get it set up in order to be a travel therapist, just so you have all the paperwork in place.
Yeah.
So even if it's like you're renting from mom and dad and you're like, I don't have a lease with my mom and dad, well, just make one.
Yeah.
Google an online template for a lease, create one, get it signed, have it on record. That way, in case you were to ever get audited, you would have it.
Yeah. And then besides the lease, you want to have some proof of payment. And if you have those two things, you should be in good shape in terms of tax home.
Colleen says, have you ever left a contract early because the company was not a good environment to work in? So we just talked about this a little while ago about canceling contracts. We've never done it. If it's a really bad, really unethical situation, yes, there are situations in which it's appropriate to quit a contract, but in most circumstances, we try to work it out. If it's just a matter of like not the scheduling not being perfect or something like that, we try to work it out.
And part of the reason why it's never happened to us is because we are very carefully interviewed to make sure to ask questions and rule out clinics that are not going to be a good fit for us, because there's certainly clinics out there that if we took jobs there, we would hate. But when we interview for those jobs, we're asking questions about the caseload, the documentation, support staff, all of that stuff. And if there's any red flags, we just pass on those jobs. So we pass on a lot of jobs that probably we would have had issues at. So the interview is very important. Try to avoid those jobs if at all possible, the ones that are not going to be a good fit for you, so that then you hopefully will not ever have to put in notice. And you can just try to, if you get like we said, if you get in a clinic and it's not a good fit for you or it's too busy or whatever, most of the time they're willing to work with you to make it more manageable. So talk to them about that.
And then as a follow-up to that, Nick in the comments had mentioned that he did cancel some contracts. And then Stephen asked, did you have to put in a 30-day notice? And Nick said he had 30-day notices on his. So he did put in his notice, but he said one of them, they gave a 2 weeks notice for him. So typically, if you're going to put in your notice, you do need to follow whatever is in your contract, whether it's a 2-week notice or a 30-day notice. Same for the company. If they decide they're going to cancel your contract, maybe they hired somebody permanently or whatever, they're typically supposed to give the notice. But there are certain circumstances, for example, say you did something really bad, something illegal or something unethical. There are circumstances where they can fire you on the spot. Same for the opposite. If there's something that's really bad, really unethical, really illegal, you can quit on the spot. And your company will back you up and there shouldn't be illegal repercussions. But if it's just something like, this isn't a good fit for me, I tried to work it out with the manager, it's not working well, typically you need to follow whatever that notice is in your contract.
Yep.
And then Allie had a comment about the work visas. Allie is from Australia, and she said it is very hard to get a work visa in the U.S. As a traveler if you are a foreign trained therapist. And that's been what we've heard as well. It's really, that's the biggest hurdle,
Yep.
unfortunately. And then Peru says, just dropping by for a quick congratulations on the baby. Thank you, Peru. So
Thank you.
We did get quite a few questions about what is life going to look like. And we'll probably do more videos just kind of talking about like what our future is going to look like too, more in detail, but we'll just briefly touch on that.
So the first question was, I'm in a travel team, also considering family planning. Are you planning to go perm now that you're expecting? So kind of like we talked about earlier in terms of our situation, saving, hustling a lot when we started, we don't have any intention to ever work full-time as PTs anymore. That's mostly just because we hustled, saved a lot, invested well, kept our expenses minimal. So we don't ever feel like we'll need to take permanent jobs. So we have no intention of doing that.
Yeah, regardless of whether we were, I was pregnant, we were going to have a child or not, we're never going to work permanent jobs. We used to not think that was the case. We used to think we would work full-time as travel therapists for 5 years and then settle down into full-time jobs. I used to think the dream would have been once we settled down full-time, like in a permanent place, that I could work maybe 32 hours if I had saved a lot. And now we've gotten in even a better financial situation than that, where we probably will just work some type of PRN or part-time situation at home. But right now, as far as when we get done with this travel contract, and I'm due in late October, we're going to go back home for a little while, and we're not exactly sure what we're going to do just yet. We'll probably work some PRN at home. We do have some other options that we've considered. We have some friends that have clinics and gyms in the area. We've talked about maybe doing some kind of cash pay PT at home for a little while. Really, we have a lot of options, and we're not sure what we want to do. But ultimately, what we do know is that we are going to continue to have a very flexible lifestyle. We are going to continue to incorporate travel as it feels appropriate. I feel like right now we are craving some stability, and we are craving being home for a bit, especially with the newborn, being close to family and all that. But we're absolutely not ruling out continuing to travel in some capacity. We're just going to kind of let life happen and see what feels like the best fit for us at the time.
Yep. All right, so along the same lines, how do you guys plan to take contracts after having a child? What would that look like in regards to time off, short-term housing versus RV, or do you plan on hanging up travel for a while? Really, we're kind of up in the air about this. Like, we don't know what it's going to be like to have a kid. We'll see how it goes. If it's a situation where everything goes perfectly and the kid is very good, then we definitely would consider continuing to take travel contracts, probably still part-time like we do now. It works out really well for us when we do these kind of contracts like we are on now, where we're working alternating days. So Whitney works Tuesday, Thursday, I work Monday, Wednesday. A situation like that we could certainly make work with a kid. So we would definitely still consider it, but there's a lot that can happen between now and then. So we just want to take things slow, see how it goes. We'll probably be home until after these contracts end at the end of June. We'll be home until the baby's here. And then we'll just take it a little bit at a time. We'll probably work PRN until we see how the baby is and how everything goes.
Yeah, honestly, the best part about the lifestyle that we set up is that we have the ultimate flexibility. And I've been talking to so many people about this lately, because right now we have patients and coworkers and things that are like, oh, what are you going to do? Like, are you going to take maternity leave? And I'm like, I can have as much maternity leave as I want. Like, we have the ultimate flexibility that we've built in because of our financial independence. So we're just going to see what feels right. We don't have to make any decisions now. And they say, once a traveler, always a traveler. I don't think we're going to stop traveling and doing amazing things with our lives. But for a while, it may feel good just to settle down and kind of get into our home life and our home community. We are keeping an eye out for houses. We have a townhouse right now that we own, but definitely in the long run, we'd like to have a bigger family home.
Yeah. A big reason too why we're keeping it open-ended is because we don't know how the kid will be, and we want our parents close by to help us in the beginning. So if it's easier than we think, we have no idea what it'll be like, then traveling could definitely be an option. We've thought about potentially having help on a contract, like somebody go with us or something like that. We've thought about a lot of things. I do think, though, in terms of the question about short-term housing versus RV, if we did continue to travel, we would probably go with an RV, because short-term housing can be difficult in some areas, and it can be unpredictable. So having a brand new baby or a few month old baby in someone else's house, or renting an apartment or something like that, I don't really think that we would want to do that. I think we'd probably go with an RV again. And for you guys that don't know, we lived in an RV for 3 years as travelers, so we're fairly familiar with that, and I think that would be the easiest choice for us.
Yeah, and a follow-up question, somebody asked, about traveling with the family in general. Are there people that do this? We do know lots of travel therapists that do travel with kids of all ages, and we've had a couple guest posts on our website if you're interested in this, about how different families did different things. From several families that we've talked to, it seems to work out best having an RV, because they like that consistency in environment for the children. You don't have to pack and move as many things, and they kind of have their home base no matter where you go. So that does seem to work really well for families. As far as how different families have made it work, we've known lots of people that did different things. So sometimes you'll have two healthcare travelers, say like us, that maybe alternate taking contracts. Maybe one of them stays home, one contract with the children, and the other one takes a contract. That can also allow you more negotiating power if you're just looking for one contract versus two. If you're coming off from being a travel couple and you know that sometimes you have to settle, if you're just looking for one contract, you have a lot more flexibility to chase the highest pay, to cover all of your living expenses for the whole family with one traveler's income. Or similarly, we know some couples where the spouse is not in healthcare and they stay home with the child, while the one healthcare worker takes travel contracts. We also have some friends that traveled for a little while, both as PTs, and they actually both would take contracts at the same time, but they took home health contracts where they had really flexible schedules. So they only had minimal hours each day that they actually needed to get childcare, and they went back to the same location a couple different times and had a consistent nanny that helped them. So there are lots of options. And if you are somebody who wants to make this work to continue traveling while having a child, there are just so many people out there doing it any which way you can think of. You can find so many resources online, people connect with people on social media, find YouTube videos and podcasts where people are talking about this stuff. You can make it work. You just have to decide what's your priority and what works best for your family.
Yep. We've got one more question, and then we'll go through the questions, the rest of the questions on Facebook and Instagram. Again, if you guys are getting value from this, please like the video. If you have friends that would be interested in these travel therapy topics, any questions, tag them or share it with them. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And feel free to ask any other questions that you have in the comments. We will go through all the questions before we finish up tonight.
So the last question, I think that we had 21 questions ahead of time, and then we've gotten a lot in the comments too. What do you plan to do about insurance with the pregnancy and when the baby comes? So this was something we thought about a lot the last couple months. What seemed best for us, especially since our work situation is kind of up in the air, we're probably not going to have health insurance through an employer. We haven't for 4 or 5 years now. Going on a marketplace plan. So Whitney has a marketplace plan, I have a marketplace plan. The baby will probably go on one of our plans as well. So that's what we plan to do. It's not, at least for Virginia, it's pretty affordable. It's not that much more than it would be if we had insurance through an employer. I think I pay like $330 a month and Whitney pays like $370 a month. So it's not terrible. And we plan to just stay on those for as long as we need to.
Yeah, previously in the last couple of years, I had been on a private plan through a private agent. And that did not offer good maternity coverage. So at the beginning of this year, actually during open enrollment in the fall last year, because I knew that we were thinking about having children soon, I switched during open enrollment to a marketplace plan that has better maternity coverage and all that. And so far, so good. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But that's our plan right now with insurance, is just to maintain our own independent of any companies, because that works best for our lifestyle. All right, so we'll answer a couple more questions that we got here in the comments. All right, John says, is it possible to negotiate more money if you're extending a travel therapy contract?
Yes, you should always get more money. How much more depends. In general, if it's just a regular extension, you're not increasing the bill rate at all. It was a situation where they would have had other options, but you just want to stay there and they want you to stay. Somewhere between an extra $1 to $2 an hour, maybe $1.50 to $2 an hour extra is a good amount. If it's a situation where they really need you and you're able to basically pitch to increase the bill rate, talk to your recruiter, say, this facility really needs me, I would like to stay, but I want to make more money on the contract. A lot of times the recruiter can go to the facility and be like, hey, they would like to stay, but if you can pay a little bit more. And in that case, they can increase the bill rate. If that's the case, then you can make, the sky's the limit. An extra $5 or $10 an hour on the bill rate would equate to an extra $200 or $300 a week on your pay. So on average, most contracts, you'll get an extra $1 or $2 an hour on your pay. But if you are in a situation where they're willing to increase the bill rate, they really need you there or they really want you there, then you can make an extra $200 or $300 a week.
All right, a couple more questions. Someone else asked about medical insurance, so we kind of covered that already. How do you handle the negotiating part if the same position is listed with different reimbursement rate from recruiter to recruiter? So like if two different agencies have the same job but listed at different rates.
Yeah, this is hard because things are not always apples to apples. So there are some companies that, I wrote an article about this like probably 4 or 5 years ago. There's companies that have intangible benefits, or they have extra benefits that other companies don't have. So one of those things might be guaranteed stipends. There are some companies that offer guaranteed stipends, there's others that don't. So if you're working with a company, say they guarantee stipends, but they're paying $50 a week less than another company that doesn't guarantee stipends, a lot of cases, it's better for you to take the contract with the company that guaranteed your stipends than the one that doesn't. Because if you miss hours, then you end up making less money, even though, if you were getting 40, then it looks like you'd make more with this one company. So another example of that is there's companies that offer other benefits like PTO or trips or other incentives. In some cases, they might pay less on a contract, but it's because you're getting these other incentives on the back end. So it's very difficult to compare. If it's a huge discrepancy, say like $300 a week or more, well, then you would just tell the one company, hey, this other company is paying a lot more. Can you match it? If not, I'm going to go with them. And in a lot of cases, they will match it. But It's not always apples to apples. If it's like a $50 difference, sometimes it has to do with the taxable rate being different, has to do with the stipends being different, has to do with the reimbursements being different on the two contracts. So keep all that in mind. Sometimes it might look like there's a $100 difference, but then when you get into it, it's like, oh, this company's going to give me $700 in reimbursements. This company's not giving me anything. And this company also has guaranteed stipends and this one doesn't. And then that makes up for basically the whole $100 difference.
Yeah, so you always want to ask if they are kind of like listing weekly rates. First, always double check that you're comparing a net pay to a net pay. Sometimes some recruiters will list it as gross, which means before tax, and some recruiters will list it as net, which means after tax. So always make sure that is the first thing you look at. Then it's best to look at the breakdown of the whole pay package. So if you're in this situation, you might just tell the two recruiters, recruiter A and recruiter B, hey, can you show me what the pay package is going to look like for this? And compare the weekly pay and the total reimbursements that you're getting for the total contract. Like Jared said, maybe one company is reimbursing for license and travel relocation costs and the other company is not. So when you get a one-time reimbursement, you want to divide that by the number of weeks in the contract, just to see how much money you're getting total across the whole contract. So make sure to compare side by side to really see if one is actually more than the other. And then like Jared said, if it is, just it helps if you know the companies pretty well, like if you worked with the recruiters for a while and you have a better idea of like other types of benefits they might offer. But if they're new recruiters to you, you may just say like, hey, can you match it or whatever. But always try to negotiate this before submitting for a job, before agreeing to submit for the job, because once you submit for the job with one of the companies, it's really the best practice to stick with that company and not switch after the fact.
Especially if you've already
they get you
interviewed
an interview,
for the position.
Yeah.
Lots of insurance
Lots
questions.
of insurance questions. So if you go back and watch the whole video, we talked a lot about insurance. We keep our own insurance year round because we do PRN work sometimes. We take time off and travel internationally sometimes. We work sometimes. So for us, we keep insurance on our own year round. Alyssa asked, when do you feel like it's beneficial to do a travel contract versus a PRN contract? I think that's the same question that we already answered earlier. So again, Alyssa, I would go back and watch that. Yeah. And 2 weeks ago, we did a video all about PRN versus travel as well. And we have an article on it too.
Yeah. In most cases, though, just in summary, if there is a travel contract available and you want to work 40 hours, definitely take the travel contract. If you don't want to work 40 hours, then probably PRN position's better. And if there's no travel position available, then PRN's your only option, basically.
Yep. Well, thank you guys for all of your questions, for those who asked in advance and who asked live. If you missed part of the video, you can always go back and re-watch it. It'll definitely be available on Facebook Replay. We're not as familiar with Instagram Replay. It might be available. If not, go to our YouTube channel. By tomorrow, I'll have it uploaded to our YouTube channel. It's just Travel Therapy Mentor on YouTube, or our podcast as well. You can listen there. If you are new to watching our videos or listening, go back and listen to all of our old stuff on our podcasts and our YouTube channel. We've got videos and podcasts about just about every topic you think of. So, we gave a quick answer about things like insurance and housing and pay, but we've done really in-depth videos and podcasts and articles on all these topics over the years. We've been doing this since 2016 is when we started our first blog. And we first started doing videos and podcasts back in like 2018, 2019. So go back, dig through some of our old stuff. We've got all the answers to all your questions, and feel free to send us a message if you have a follow-up question or something detailed. Again, if you guys are interested in getting connected with the best recruiters specific to your situation, fill out our recruiter recommendation form on our website, and we'd be happy to help you get set up.
Yeah, we got a lot more questions about recruiters, but we condensed that all in just to the 2 or 3 questions. That's a very common question we get is, how do you find companies? Which ones are the best? Again, it's not one size fits all answer. It depends on what you're looking for. So if you are looking for companies and recruiters, definitely fill out that form. Tell us what you're looking for, and we can match you with one or more of the dozen that we work with that should work well for your situation.
Yep. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Yep, take care.
Bye.
Bye.